Hello everyone, this video has been a long time in coming. I wanted to do a quick run through of my Homelab. As you can see here, everything is displayed on homepage, and even though my hardware is fairly modest, I am able to run quite a bit without using too much of the available resources. So recently I upgraded from a Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 gigs of RAM to an Orange Pi 6 Plus, which you can see here. I will include all the links to the GitHub for my Homelab, as well as the various hardware that I'm using. So when you look here, this is actually a very new piece of hardware. I believe it was October or November of 2025 it was released, but it is running very well with my whole Kubernetes stack. I'm using Ubuntu 26 on that, and I will have a video going more in detail on that and the experience so far. The other piece of hardware that I have is an HP ProBook 430 G6, which you can see you can get for a fairly reasonable price used on eBay, which is what I did. I think it cost me about 120 bucks, and it has 16 gigs of RAM and an i3 processor. So yeah, in here on my homepage, you can see I have a lot that I'm testing out with regarding AI and LLMs. WebUI is my main chat that I use to test various MCP servers that I'm working on, as well as different models and testing out some free offerings from different providers. I also have Llama Factory, Quadrant as my vector database, Fresh RSS for some RSS feeds, LibreChat as an alternative to WebUI. Also, I'm experimenting with Jupyter Notebooks and also Phoenix. This is Arize Phoenix, which allows you to hook up things like WebUI, and you can actually go in here and see some of the traces and spans and different things that you have to actually track the conversations that you're having with your LLMs in WebUI. I have some pretty standard monitoring and observability setup in Grafana and Prometheus as well. I can see my whole Homelab. I can see the database size for my Postgres database or Mongo database, whatever I have, as well as some MCP server monitoring here, which does also show up when you configure it in Arize Phoenix as well. Here is my Quadrant deployment, still a work in progress. I'm hoping to make a video on that soon. PG Admin, which just helps me administer my Postgres database, Context Forge, which is an MCP gateway, more or less, with some authentication capabilities, as well as some virtual server capabilities where I can specify the specific tools I want to expose from the MCP servers that I'm running. I also have MCPO, which I believe is MCP open. It's an open source proxy for various MCP servers. So I use that for some out-of-the-box MCP servers like Kubernetes and others that I'm working with. I also have a local deployment of AWX, which is a front-end open source for Ansible. I'm doing some testing there. I do also have N8N, Jenkins, Loki, Coder, some various other things in my Homelab that I'm using to test out. I have Redis as my quick caching software to help with some of the performance of WebUI, and then also the performance of Context Forge. And then regarding how this is all deployed, so it's a full Kubernetes stack managed through Flux. So basically everything that I have in my code, which I can pull up here, all of this is operating under a GitOps flow where it uses Flux to sync all the manifests and the Helm charts and everything else that I have in my Kubernetes Homelab, which you can see here. I'm not going to go into too much depth today on how each of these is configured, but if I just pull one up, I'm using Customize, and it basically says, these are all the YAML configs that I want. Flux will sync that to my cluster and then deploy the pods accordingly. So you can see all the pods are running here. If you're familiar with Flux, you know generally how it's working, but if I run this command, it's going to pull down everything from my GitHub repo and then sync it to my cluster, or whatever is in that code, it gets pushed as the config for this cluster. So if I remove some config, it's going to tear down those pods, and vice versa. If I add some new code, it's going to spin it up from there. So it's very functional, especially for a Homelab. I only have one worker node and one control plane node, so it's nothing crazy, just for my own testing, but it does work very well. So that being said, and you can see the homepage, I just refreshed because I ran that Flux sync, But yeah, let me know if this was helpful. Let me know if you have questions about any of these particular items, or if you want me to make a more in-depth video on any of these pieces of my Homelab. I do have plans for quite a bit more regarding MCP. I'll be releasing some videos related to MCP servers that I have running, as well as N8N that hooks into those MCP servers, as well as various LLM backends. And yeah, as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks.